Right, good morning to everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Most excellent.
Excellent.
Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Steve. I just don't want that phone to ring again.
Say again?
I said, I just don't want that phone to ring again. I'm not answering it this time. I thought it was you, or I wouldn't have picked it up.
Okay. Well, I hope that everybody who is logged on has already been through your audio setup, but just in case you haven't, I'm getting a big echo in my earphones. Do you have any suggestions on how to make that stop?
You talking to me?
Sure, you and Lee J.
Okay, wait a minute. I got to get my headset out.
Anyway, if we can just go through these quick setup strategies, and we'll all be in the same place. If you have done your audio setup, and just by following the directions up here on
can you see me by any chance? Oh no, you can't.
I can't see you, but I can hear you. I see you.
Can you see me now?
I see you now.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Everybody who's looking at Steve in the video box, you have options down on the lower left corner of that box that say fine color, coarse grays, coarse color, medium grays. If you choose fine color, you'll get the best image. It's a little bit slower to load.
Can you hear me now?
It's all black. We can hear you, but we can't see you anymore. And now Steve's gone. Okay, quick reminder that everything that you type into the chat box, all of the moderators will be able to see. You can control whether the rest of the group sees it, but everything that gets typed, the moderators see. We'd ask that you keep your microphone button turned off, except when you're asking a question, and that way we won't get any of the feedback or background noise coming through. This session is being recorded, and it will be available on the web. Would really appreciate if all the agents would log in your participants on the wiki, so you could give us a count of how many people from your county participated in this session. That really helps us as we're preparing proposals to get funding to expand the capacity of the program, to know how many people we're reaching and what's happening. Also, it would be really helpful if agents would register on the LMS system so be sure that you get credit for your advanced training. Okay. Steve, if you're not going to use the video box, I'm going to go ahead and shut that box, and you guys can too.
I thought I closed it, but okay. I'm still
you guys may need to individually close it on your own screen.
Okay. Well, I think I closed it.
Yeah, you may have closed it on your screen, but people may need to close it individually on their own screen. It was still open on mine.
Okay.
So I went ahead and closed it. Guys, there's lots of information about the plant clinics. This is where the handouts that speakers provide. This is where there's information about the upcoming topics. It's where the links to the videos of previous sessions are loaded. All the information about how to use Illuminate successfully, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everything that we can think of that would be useful for you to know about participating in this Plants, Pests, and Pathogens workshop is located on this website. So you can write that down, or you can just, if you Google me, Lucy Bradley at ncsu.edu, you come to my homepage, and one of the choices there is Plants, Pests, and Pathogens, and it'll take you right to it. By the way, I forgot to say good morning. This is Lucy Bradley. I'm the Urban Horticulture Specialist at NC State, and delighted to be working with you on the Plants, Pests, and Pathogens training. This is a lineup of today's program. We have Ann Edwards, Diane Turner, both providing agent insights to share with you, and then also weed issues from the Northeast that Tom Campbell has participated and contributed to. Oops, we just went backwards. our main program of the day is Steve Moore, who's going to be talking with us about organic gardening, and then we'll have our anchors, the current diseases with Mike Munster and current insects with Dave Stephan. And Lee J. Hicks is our moderator. Lee J. is our technology queen who has kept us running smoothly through all this transition. Lee J., do you have any tips or suggestions or things? Let me just turn the meeting over to you for a minute.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Illuminate. Don't forget that the checks and X's are up top for you to select yes or no for your answers. Also, use the chat window if you have any questions. I will be happy to talk to you one-on-one. And if you have any questions, just let me know. Over to you.
Thanks, Lee J. All right. Well, our first aid is up is Ann Edwards. I don't see Ann. Oh, yes, you do. You're just for the whole county. Sorry. So Ann Edwards, let me turn the floor over to you. I'm not hearing Ann.
Ann's not on.
Okay.
You know it's
Ann,
only 9
if you're there, can you? What?
You know it's only 9 o'clock, right?
Oh my gosh. I really shouldn't take cold medicine. Well, that was a great dry run. Golly.
You had me scared. I wasn't quite sure. Because I'm not prepared.
Scared. All right, how do I turn the record off?
You don't.
You don't?
Well, maybe you can.
Maybe I can pause it. Pause. Okay. Insights, Ann Edwards and Diane Turner will both be sharing, and we also have Tom Campbell has shared some weed issues that are occurring in the northeast part of the state. Our keynote speaker, if you will, is Steve Moore on organic gardening, and then we'll have our anchors of Mike Munster and Dave Stephan talking about current diseases and current insects. Lee J. Hicks is our moderator. Lee J. is our technology wizard who has guided us through the transition to this whole new system of delivering the program. Lee J., any words of wisdom for today? Well, I think one that Lee J. may have stepped away for a second to take care of somebody. One of the things that she does is if you have questions or problems, you can call her directly or email her directly, and she'll help coordinate that. One of the things that she'd want you to be aware of is that there's a checkbox and an X box in the second level menu across the top of your screen, and those will be used for both voting and for the Q&A parts of the program later on in the show. And also she would encourage you to use the chat window to provide input or if the mic's tied up. All right. Our first speaker this morning is Ann Edwards. Ann is the Extension Agent in Carteret County. Ann, I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Wow, I didn't think I was going to be first up. I was asked to just talk a little bit about what's going on in Eastern Carolina right now, and also to mention one little program addition that I've been doing. So I'm going to start with what's going on. Interestingly, we have been pretty slow on our tomato diseases this year. Normally by now I would be getting lots and lots of calls, but instead I've had only one tomato disease call. So obviously this year's weather has not been conducive to our usual massive tomato disease problems. What I have been getting instead are calls from people indicating that their tomatoes are not ripening as quickly as they thought they would. And I think most of those are simply people not keeping track of how long it's been, people who have both little cherry tomatoes as well as full-size tomatoes and expected the full-size ones to ripen as quickly as some of their cherry varieties. It's been very, very dry here. We're getting a lot of calls about ornamentals that are showing symptoms of discoloration of leaves, dropping leaves, other things that just appear to be environmental stress. We did, however, have a huge all-day slow rainfall yesterday, which was wonderful. So hopefully that has been, that's going to correct some of those problems out in the ornamentals. We've seen our first pine wilt nematode on Japanese black pines. That's a pretty nasty pest that we have on the introduced Japanese black pine down here. Once you find them in the pine, you pretty much need to take that tree out and try to get rid of everything before it infests other pines.
Hey, Ann, we're not hearing you. Are you back on? I see your mic. Turn your mic on.
I'm sorry. I don't know what happened there.
Okay, we were just correcting some extra audio.
Oh, okay. All right. Did y'all hear me when I started talking about bees?
No.
How long have I been turned off? Pine wilt nematode?
You'll have to ask your husband.
Ah! All right.
Just about 10 seconds.
All right. Apparently, part of what I was saying was missed when they were correcting some audio. As far as honeybees I was talking about, there's been far fewer swarms this year than in the prior 2 years, which is interesting. The beehives all seem to be fairly healthy, but not swarming as much as usual, but at the same time also not putting aside as much honey. Local beekeepers are talking about the fact that they have maybe half the honey stores put away that they had last year, and also that the bees are much, much slower to cap the honey this year, which is interesting considering how dry it's been, that it's been slow to get capped. So that's pretty much the update of what's been going on here coastally. The other thing that Lucy asked me to mention is one of the things we're doing here in Carteret as part of the horticulture program is a blog. And that blog is called soundharvest.blogspot.com, and it's a much more casual way of reaching folks who might be more interested in a more one-on-one casual interaction rather than some of the other methods we have of reaching people. And it's simply something I update usually once a week or once every 2 weeks with exactly what's going on in my own yard as far as ornamentals, vegetables, fruits, bees, and backyard chickens. And I do have now 82 subscribers to that blog, which means if I do 4 entries a month, I've reached close to 400 contacts on that information. And then I have a link to the extension webpage on my blog and a link to my blog on the extension webpage. So go check that out, and Lucy thought that was just maybe an interesting aside. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Ann. Next on up is Diane Turner. Diane is the county agent in Henderson County, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Diane. Let's see. I see that Diane has loaded up an image to share with us. Okay, Lucy, can you hear me? Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Okay, John showed me how to load my blog. Can you see that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Well, it looks like Ian and I were on the same page today after talking to you. I was just going to briefly mention a team blog that Tim Matthews and I have been doing in the western part of the state. And it has really, really picked up and been successful. So I would like to encourage other agents across the state, if they are into blogging. I know it's a new thing and a new technology, but it is really fun. And we've had a lot of success from it. So you can see here, we try to do probably once a week as well what's going on in the western part of the state. Normally a common problem, a common insect you'll see. Last week I wrote about bagworms. I had probably 3 samples within a matter of days come in, all on Japanese maples with a bagworm problem. So we are using the blog to try to share information that way. And it is called masteryourgarden.blogspot.com if anyone would like to try it out. And it is nice to encourage people to do a teamwork type blog, because if I'm really busy or out of the county for 1 week, then Tim normally will pick it up and he will put something on the blog that week. So it is real helpful to get 2 or even more. I can imagine having 4 or 5 people working on a blog together if your counties are near each other, and helping each other out that way. But let's see, this blog also is great because as I see things come into the Master Gardener info line, I can put it on the blog, and this goes out to all of my Master Gardeners, and it updates them as well as to what we are seeing in the hotline. So when they come in to answer the phone, they're already up to date on what we've been seeing.
And there's a question about how to get started.
Okay, I knew that question would come up. John Dorner is an IT agent for the state, and I'm really lucky, I must say. He is here in Henderson County, so anytime I have any problems with technology, I can just run down the hallway and ask him. But he said he would be glad to help any agent start their own blog. It is free. You can go to www.blogspot.com and start your own blog for free. All you do is you choose your background, you choose your colors, and you choose your layout, and you can put links to Cooperative Extension, as you can see we did here on the right-hand side of our blog. You can go to Haywood County or Henderson County, and that way it leads right back into extension programming. So it really has been good. And I would like to mention that we are shocked at how many people visit this blog. We started it in 2007, and we have a blog patrol site that tells us how many people visit it every day, and for reporting measures, you know how important that can be. And we have had 10,800 visitors since 2007, and those are different visitors. So, and it says, I normally forecast 28 people a day come to our blog and read the information. So I know a lot of people out there really don't want to add another thing on your plate, but if you are looking to expand your reach and use some technology, this is a great way for extension agents to do that. Are there any other questions? If not, that's all I've got.
Okay. Thanks, Diane. Our next, Diane, your speaker's still on, your microphone's still on. Next up is Steve Bambera. Steve is going to be talking about some weed issues that Tom Campbell has brought to attention.
Hello, everybody. Tom did not have a good audio line, so he sent these images in, and he actually sent me a script. So if you can pretend that I've got a beard, I'm not sure if Tom still has a beard, but pretend I'm wearing a sun helmet, and I'm going to read what Tom has to say. Tom wanted to bring up 3 important weeds, new weeds that are in the area, and the first one is a Scottish thistle, which is wickedly spiny, as Tom says, and often stands taller than basketball players, but can hide in grass 2 feet tall as well. So I guess that covers Spud Webb and David Robinson and all those people, and Shaquille O'Neal. Each plant can have 1 to a score of seed stems, which load up with flowers that ultimately grow dozens and dozens of seeds apiece. Thousands of seeds may drift away from each plant on downy parachutes carried very far on winds. And do you recall the poem, The Night Before Christmas, where away they all flew like the down of a thistle? You can tell that Tom wrote that. So, let's see. Anyway, so these, and some of the other thistles frequently spread along highways. They can be a real problem. They are easily transported around, and animals don't eat them. You'll see them in pastures, and can be a real problem. So, I'm not sure if Lee J got those next ones loaded or not. You can see how spiny they are, and just gazillions of flowers. Here they are spread, and you can see how they blow along the path of any kind of a road. And, of course, this wouldn't help either if you pull them up and then drive down the road in your pickup truck. So, alright, so the second one that Tom wanted to bring up is mare's tail weed, which is also called horseweed. It's another biennial like the Scottish thistle, only the horseweeds are not spiny. After passing the winter as a basal rosette, they grow very straight and slender up to 5 feet tall. Many of these are now totally immune to glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup and some of the other herbicides that we have. And they're giving farmers fits with the seeds that ride on the winds and stick to tires and just get carried around all along the roadways and streets. With the thistles and the horseweeds, you've got months to detect before they seed out. And Tom has tried to emphasize throughout the little text here that if you will mow or pull up, whatever you can do to these weeds before they flower out and seed, you are making a big impact on them. So the last, that's a little closer up of the head before it flowers. Then the last weed is Palmer amaranth. And this is a cousin of the red root pigweed. And Palmer amaranth is a summer annual, but it's so vigorous it seeds out. You can hear the phone in my background here. But it's so vigorous it seeds out early after germination with over 30,000 seeds per plant per season. And many of them are also glyphosate immune. So all 3 weeds are pretty easily pulled up in the early stages if recognized for what they are, and before they get a chance to flower and seed out. And what frustrates Tom are the number of property owners who just ignore these things and probably don't recognize them and let them just go on out to seed and blow everywhere, and particularly not just in their yards but also along public areas, etc. So this is a worsening problem, particularly in the northeast, Pasquotank County, but it's really moving all over. So, I'm no weed expert, but Lucy, that's what I've got. I'm not sure, I didn't check to see if Tom was logged in. If there's a question, he may be able to type an answer for us.
Let's see. Does anybody have any questions about the weeds that Tom featured? I can see Tom is logged in. Tom, you might use your, let's see if I can enable your microphone if anybody has any questions about weeds, so that then Tom could answer those. One hand raised. Where? Alexander County, you want to ask your question?
Is there an alternative chemical to glyphosate for these weeds?
Okay, I'm not.
Okay.
Is Tom going to answer? The question was if there was an alternate to glyphosate for these weeds. Someone else might know a better answer to that, or may also know the answer to that, possibly. And the name of the last weed that we have this question also, the name of the last weed is Palmer amaranth, and I'll type that in for you.
And Tom has responded via the chat that there are many herbicides that are labeled for broadleaf weeds that you could use on these. Okay, many thanks to Tom for all of the images and the information, and to Steve for sharing that. Thanks to Diane and Ann for coming on and sharing what they're doing with their programs. And at this point, we'll move into our keynote speaker, and that is Steve Moore. I'm thrilled that Steve was able to make time to be with us this morning. Steve is an expert in organic gardening and biointensive sustainable gardening, food production. And he has agreed to talk with us about organic gardening and to answer your questions about organic gardening on the backyard scale. Steve, let me just turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Lucy. I appreciate that. Lucy stuck in that picture. I guess it's okay, but for those of you who know me, I did trim up as per my wife's request when we left the farm and came to an academic setting. And just to clear up, I am at NC State. I work out of crop science, but I am totally dedicated to the Center for Environmental Farming Systems and work down here in Goldsboro. So we're going to go ahead and get started. This is my first time doing this, so if you bear with me a little bit as I fumble around with the eraser and chalkboard. And it's a very, Lucy asked me to give a very general introduction to organic gardening. So we're going to talk a little bit about the do's and don'ts, kind of things that master gardeners might ask, and then a few little section on how you would go about becoming certified as well and what's involved with that. It is going to be general, and we have about 20 minutes, 25 minutes now or so, and I would welcome people to raise questions. If we get a little bogged down, we may slow up on the questions. So here we go, and we'll march off with that. So in general, what is organic production? People pretty much know what you can't do and what you can do, but it's nice to look at it in a holistic way. And the National Organic Plan and Program of the USDA defines it quite well. We'll just read that through quick. A system of production that is managed, and that's the big word in organic production, is management. It's all about knowledge management and putting that to work in a very holistic way. And it represents site-specific, another key word, because what works at my farm or at the research farm or at my own home garden may not work at yours. So it really makes it important that we all be really aware of where we are. Integration, another key word, cultural, biological, and mechanical practice that foster cycling of resources and promote ecological balance and conserve biodiversity. Now, there's hardly anybody that I know that really just has an all-out desire to use up resources or to create problems in our situation in the world here, and who doesn't want to see a lot of wildlife and enjoy that. But how going about it is where the devil's in the details, and we need to kind of press forward with that. I think also from a marketing point of view, we've seen a 20% plus increase in organic sales yearly since really the mid-90s, and that's an incredible economic engine pushing things along. I'd like to differentiate between organic and sustainable production as well. The organic is great. It focuses on being environmentally sound, but in a broader sense, that's a good thing, but it may not be the only thing to consider. And sustainable production would include the principles of organic, plus look at economic viability and being socially just. And it really applies not only to the production, but the whole food system, and in a much more holistic way even than organic production itself. So who controls and what is okay? Who makes the rules? And the rules, okay, we got a hand raised. Barbara, go ahead. Okay. Barbara, sorry if I lost you. I see your streaming is slow. Maybe we can pick up again. The Organic Standards Board was set up to review and look at what is and what isn't going to be certified, and it took quite a lengthy debate to work that through. Like anything, it isn't perfect, but it really does represent a pretty fair representation of what should or shouldn't be on and involved with organic. That little symbol, when you see it, is the USDA's certification that the organization that certified the farmer is for real and meets the criteria. So there's actually several steps involved. The farm applies to an organization who has to be certified, who has previously, the organization previously applies to the USDA to be certified. And that's quite a lengthy process. I know in Pennsylvania it took almost 1,800 pages for PASA and Pennsylvania Certified Organic to be an organization that could be certified. The other key player in this is the Organic Materials Review Institute, which is a third-party group that really takes a look at different materials and standards and makes recommendations that are accepted by the NOSB or your independent certifier. So it's a little bit about that. So in real general, what can you use and what can't be used? Synthetic soil amendments and pesticides are out. Treated and MGO seeds are out. Land that has not been clean of these elements for less than 3 years, so you need a 3-year window of clean ground in order to be certified. Some other things that are a little pickier but are interesting: raw manure application within 120 days of harvest is an important rule to keep in mind, and of course food safety is the key issue there. Antibiotics for animals, but there's a lot of rules for that too. They don't want animals to suffer. As a grower, an organic herdsman, you are required to treat animals so that they don't suffer, but then those animals, if it needs to go to an antibiotic type treatment, they do need to be placed away from your herd and not integrated into the organic market. And then total animal confinement is a no-no as well. So what can and must be used? The key thing here is an organic system plan and good record keeping, and they encourage you to keep records for at least 5 years to really know and see what's going on. And this is not only for the certifiers to know what's happening, it's also for you as the farmer or gardener to be able to see trends and problems, situations within your own production scheme so that you can plan ahead, find alternatives, better alternatives, increasing your management practices, to use more and more integrated approaches to pest problems and yield needs and production and so forth.
Steve, do you guys have on the STEPS website or somewhere, do you have like, blank journals or guidance on what types of records to keep or how best to organize your records so that you can see those trends and relationships? And
we don't have them on our website. You can go, we're right in a transition here in North Carolina. North Carolina Crop Improvement Association was our certifying agency within the state. For budget reasons and some other things, they will not be a certifier in the future. So we're going out of state to another certifier, and we haven't used their forms yet, but they are available online, so you can check it out. Is that kind of, anybody have any other questions about that?
could you just give us the name of that certifier so if we were going to look that up online, we could know where to go?
That's the International Certification Services, and they're in Medina, North Dakota. Now, as a disclaimer, we've chosen them because of cost, and the representative from North Carolina Crop Improvement Association, she is still with us, Amy Greiner, here in Raleigh. And so we wanted to work with her because she became affiliated with this other certification service. There's probably 70 other certifiers in the United States that can do the same function, and it's always good to shop around. The other thing that's required is that you need an on-site inspection by a certified independent inspector. And you can use any inspector that is approved, and they can turn in their paperwork and so forth to any certifying agency that you do choose. We'll cover that a little bit later on. Okay, we've got a question there. Cindy? Go ahead, Cindy.
Just wondering how a 30-foot buffer might work to protect against genetically modified crops. It just doesn't.
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite catch that question.
Genetically modified crops, how do they impact the organic?
Well, two ways. One is they're not allowed, but the other one, I suspect where your question is coming from, is the drift from other contamination. Is that true?
Buffer doesn't seem like that would be enough to protect against genetically modified crops in the vicinity.
No, it isn't, to be honest, and that's where it really gets to be hard. You know, if somebody has a farm and they want to farm organically, how much space, and of course prevailing winds and on would make a huge difference. We're encouraged as organic producers to put up buffers, which might include tree barriers and things of that nature. But it's really difficult to control that. The same really from some of the synthetic pesticides and that we get either from groundwater contamination or from the atmosphere, rain. Those drop in on your farm without warning. Okay. Does that answer your question, Cindy?
Yes, thank you.
You know, the organic system is not perfect. We all know that pollen can travel a long way, and to try to have an absolutely flawless system that would compensate that would be an awesome mess, to be honest. So they've made best judgments and kind of rule of the thumb ideas, and that's why I said that you know, it was kind of a combination of practical and trying to get as close as you can without being ridiculous. What has shown out, though, I think two things that we can say is that there's been a lot of testing of organic foods, fruits and vegetables, and there is a significant reduction in the amount of pesticides and things that show up in those tests. Then you'd say, uh-oh, somebody's cheating. But the real reason is that things come from either past practices that have stayed in the soil, like the breakdown of DDT to DDE is apparent in the soil for up to a quarter of a century. How long do you want a farm to stay out of organic production before all chemicals are gone and no rain drops from the sky and the water you draw from the earth becomes pure? And that's that ugly compromise. Okay, the question here is from the group, are all compost piles organic? Well, in the non-quote organic world, sure. If it's a carbon-based compound, eventually it'll rot up, and I guess that's what we would all generally say as organic and natural. In the quote compost or organic world, then you have to apply by the rules that the standard board has set. And that is that the compost has to be turned so many times and has to attain such a certain temperature within a time constraint that allows it to be certified. And here again, the intent of it is, I think, to drive growers crazy. No, the intent is really for the compost to be as safe from a good agricultural practices as can reasonably be, so that when compost is applied, we minimize food safety issues. So it's interesting. A lot of people say, well, organic, you know, people running around through fields and happy, and, you know, you're not attending to details. But if you're an organic certifier, you have rules in place that follow along good agricultural practices and are required, whereas a conventional grower doesn't have that constraint. So that's a little interesting sideline. Organic or approved seed. It's tough to get organic seed for everything. It's becoming increasingly available since the early 90s when there was a limited supply. And the rule is simple. If you can't find the cultivar that you want and can show 3 sources that didn't have it, you can use a non-organic seed as long as it's not treated and not genetically modified. Some growers seek out organic seed so that they can be in total compliance and with the philosophy and underpinnings of organic. Other growers will look for seed that they can find in 3 sources so they can buy it cheaper, and it varies across the board with people's needs. And as market growers and home growers, we have certain cultivars that just really work good on our farms and gardens, and we really want to be able to use them and not be limited to something that's just organically approved.
So you have another question about the compost?
Sure.
What if there are products that, if you have plant material that's been sprayed with herbicides or has had inorganic fertilizers or whatever put on it, does that impact whether or not it can be composted and become an organic product?
It can be used in organic production, and that includes livestock as well. If you have poultry litter or things of that nature that have, and so you have to be careful. And I have to say that not all organic compost is going to be great compost. People make it fast and hot, and they use a lot of nitrogen in there to make it a very fast turnover. kind of a compost. So it's important to check. In Europe, they actually have standards for stability, and we aren't quite to that point yet. So you can buy, a person, as you all well know, you can buy a load of compost, and it may not be what you want or have the same nutrients and value as something of another compost. And we're going to cover more of these in detail here. Let's go through and look at these natural soil amendments. Of course, compost, if it's approved, lime, and we use a good bit of feather meal down here. We have a pretty high phosphorus soil, and then we supplement the potassium with potassium sulfate, mine sourced. We used to use a lot of soy meal, and that's about 6% in, and has a little bit more nicely blended mix. But the certifying agencies are encouraging farmers, organic farmers, to move away from that because the amount of genetic modified organisms in them, I don't know, you could argue all day whether feather meal from confinement chickens with the supplements they get is any better, but that's what they're doing, so you play by the rules. For those of you who don't want to do a whole lot of mixing and secret combinations of organisms and amendments behind the doors to get your garden to grow, there's a lot of off-the-shelf blended organic fertilizers. It's tough to get a high end value, but hopefully as we look holistically at our gardens and farms, we can supplement a lot of that in with crop rotations, and also capture that in by using cover crops such as rye and other things, so that we keep it cycling within our farms and gardens and not just kind of lost away. We're going to need to move a little bit faster. That's my problem. There's such things as organic no-till. You can use rye. Here's some on the left is rye and vetch that can be rolled down and planted into to hold on to nutrients and to supply additional nutrients. On the right there is some onions with, we used cowpea and millet as a roll down. Of course, the backbone of these crop rotations are either legumes or bicultures with legumes. There's some Austrian winter field peas with some root nodulation on it. We have a nitrogen contribution from these cover crops. Just thought we'd look at those. Those are under optimal conditions with good inoculation, but it's impressive when you look at what can be accumulated in your soils and used down the road for subsequent crops. In insect management, we have a good many things, and the mainstay of it is good healthy plants, good crop rotations, releasing of beneficial insects, and farmscaping, which is becoming increasingly popular for beneficial. The photo is one that I love, one taken on our own farm of an orb spider munching down on a spotted cucumber beetle, one of my least favorite pests. Isolation covers, and then there's what I call my silver bullet of organic production, and that's Pyganic. Very pricey, upwards of $180 per quart, but it will do pretty well. And then we also, in terms of insect management, need to provide help for the pollinators. Some beneficial insects that might fit into scaping. The top left is borage for providing and encouraging pollinators. Dill in the lower left, and valerian, sweet clover. There's a lot of crops that will be great for beneficial insects. And an IGR is an insect growth regulator, and it can helpful in disrupting cycles and breaking them of insects. Okay. Thanks, Steve, for answering that. Appropriate weed management. That is the #1 problem that I've had over the years as an organic producer, is to use appropriate crop rotations and stale seed beds or fallow seed beds and mechanical cultivation. There are some new products that have been approved, including acetic acid-based compounds and clove oil-based. They're fairly pricey and have moderate work. We're doing a lot of work with testing with those here at the center, but it's tough to beat good crop rotations, choking out the weeds with those cover crops, and then providing stale seed bed. So what if you want to get certified and you need to apply to the rules and apply to third-party validation? It's just an important thing to remember that if a person that you work with has gross sales under $5,000, they can use the organic term on their product and be within the rules and regulations as long as they apply to the rules. If it's over $5,000 of gross sales and they claim their product to be organic, they could receive a $10,000 fine if they say they're organic and they're not. I don't know anybody who's been fined. I know one person who was close and was asked to be careful, and they did. Oops, sorry about that. Hit the wrong button. Let me get caught up here. Steps to certification. You request an application, submit an application. The certifying agency will review your application and provide an on-site inspection. The inspector actually sits down with you before you leave, so you have the opportunity to discuss what he or she has seen before you see it on paper and need to really explain something that was a misunderstanding or not completely evident. Then the certifying agent looks at the inspection and then receives notification of certification, comes back to you. It's a very straightforward process. It's been well used. It's just one after another, but it does take time. So someone asked about the farm records, and these are the kinds of things that you would really want to take a look at and be sure that you have available. And I'm going to just leave these up, and you can get the PowerPoint online, and so we're going to a little short for time, so you just go right down through these things: a field history, seed purchase records, input records, so on, sales records and storage records to get what you need. So I think we've rushed through that, probably way too fast, but I wanted to cover those two things, and I will open it up for questions.
You have two questions that have come in on the chat. Steve, is recertification annual, and why does North Carolina not have a certifying agency? And then there's also a question about CEF's workshops.
Okay. Yes, you have to apply annually for recertification, and North Carolina, just for whatever reason, this does not have a certifying agency within the state. Some states like Maryland and New Hampshire, their state government agencies, their state ag departments actually control or run the organic certification program. Most states use a third-party validation. And as far as the CEF's workshops, we have, if you go to, let me just type that right in. Then you can go to this website and pick up our information about CEFs, our workshops, and other events happening around. As far as CEF's events coming up, you're in luck. All roads lead to Goldsboro tomorrow. There's a farmscaping workshop. that will begin at 9 tomorrow morning. Dr. David Orr will be presenting that, and just checking right now, it's $20, which includes a barbecue lunch. And if you want to, you can contact it at cefs_info@ncsu.edu and sign up for that.
Steve, what cover crops do you recommend for home gardens?
Well, for my own personal home garden, I steer a good bit away from rye because I do my whole garden. I have about a 4,000 square foot garden at home. I do it by hand, so it's really tough to incorporate the rye. If I use the rye and crimson clover as a roll down, which means I get my wife and I out there and we stomp the rye down or roll it down with a barrel and then plant into that residue, that works good. The other cover crop for winter covers that I like is the Austrian winter field pea, and is great. If I want it winter killed so that I have a clean bed real early to get stuff started in, then I might use something that like cowpea or millet that will die or over when frost hits it, and then I can just clean off the residue and plant right in it quickly in the spring. Great questions. Do we have some more?
Do you have any recommendations for a summer cover crop?
Summer cover crops, I really like cowpeas. We use a lot of the millets, Japanese millet for one, and we use a good bit of the sorghums. I like an old-fashioned variety called Hagari, and we use some of the sorghum Sudan grasses that grow so quick and are quite nice for other reasons too, because a cover crop can do not only adding biomass or trapping nitrogen, they can also enhance for beneficial insects, and some of them have exudates that can reduce seed germination and things like that. But you have to be careful too, because they can also attract things that you don't want. If you don't incorporate your residue quickly enough, we found here in eastern North Carolina that you can have some problems with like corn root maggot and things that will come in on that residue and then work over things like potatoes. Okay. Any other questions?
Your question about buckwheat for beneficials as a cover crop?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that one up. Sorry about that. Buckwheat is a great one, and of course it brings in a lot of the beneficials that we hope to bring in as well. We let on our farm and here at the center, we use a lot in the umbelliferae family and use them to generate not only food, but they also bring in pollinators and other small, mostly parasitoid wasps and other things. And then we have the nice part, we use a lot of open pollinated seeds so that we have our own seed stock for next year. So make things work. You know, it's kind of that permaculture idea of making things have many functions. We don't have time in this world to let one thing do one thing. It has to perform a lot of functions to be really kind of incorporated and valid, especially in organic management.
What about fava beans as a cover crop?
We use some fava beans. In the wintertime, I've had trouble. Windsor variety, I have them the last 2 winters. They've kind of got hit hard with the frost. But Banner is a smaller fava bean that does grow well, and it can be a great fall-winter cover crop. And a food crop as well.
Can a homeowner who wants to be organic buy non-organic seeds and still consider themselves organic?
if they want to be in compliance with the organic standards, they need to what we call seed source, meaning that they have to show that they cannot find that cultivar from 3 sources. If they grow the seeds themselves under organic practices and have, then of course that's fine. Good sources for organic seeds. Some of Johnny's selected seeds in Maine have really expanded their catalog. Seeds of Change they are exclusively organic, as is High Mowing Seeds. And a really good source of fairly economical seeds is Bedco Seeds in Waterville, Maine. Got a question on organic fertilizer. I really like feather meal, especially down here where we're phosphorus loaded down here. It really allows me to make sure that I don't add in much more phosphorus to my soils, and then I can go with the potash or potassium sulfate in order to make up the difference on that end. If you can't get that, then a lot of the big box stores, Lowe's and Walmart even, are starting to carry organic blended fertilizers. The hard thing is with, as you all know, with buying anything, if you buy tiny amounts at a specialty store, the price is exorbitant. If you go and you go down to a big farm supply and you buy a 50-pound bag of feather meal or a 100-pound bag of feather meal, whatever they have, then your price per N is just minuscule. So it's important to make that work, especially for home gardeners or small growers that can really get turned off by going in and buying 25-pound bags and getting really burnt on the price. Sources near the coast, I would have to check on that, and if my email is steve_moore@ncsu, as in the poster there, just send me an email and I'll try to help you locate that. Lucy is working on that hyperlink. While she does that, is there any other questions that have come up?
Just let me clarify. Hyperlink to what? I'm not sure what the request was. So if you could just type that into the chat box again, which link you wanted, I'd be happy to do it. Okay, any other questions for Steve on organic gardening?
Lucy, I had a question. Maybe we can use our check boxes.
Sure.
Have people been getting a lot of questions about organic gardening, a lot of interest from people that your clients and those you serve? If so, could you check your green check box and we'll just kind of get a feel for that? Okay, so there's some interest, but not a tremendous amount of interest. That's interesting because we're seeing, of course, in the grocery stores, we're seeing such a huge demand and disparity there. Great. Well, Lucy, if there's no other questions, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, Steve, thank you very, very much for being with us and for sharing all of that information. Really appreciate that. All right, next up is current issues with insects in entomology. We have Dave Steffen is here to do that. Dave, I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Actually, this is Mike. You caught Dave by surprise. He was over there at his terminal. We switched the order around. We're going to go diseases first here, if we may, although...
All right.
Next slide. Next slide after Dave there. Okay. Okay, that's the extra one. Back where we were is fine. I inserted it after Dave's picture.
Okay, hang on. Oops.
Now let me just comment. We got some of that nice rain yesterday here. It was the first halfway decent rain in many weeks after spring, and then it turned off so dry at the end part of June, and we'll see how that affects our diseases that'll be going on. All right.
Fair.
Okay, I've got an instruction here to stay close to the mic. That shouldn't be too hard to do. Now let's see. Where are we? Oh, that was the other one. Let me, if I can do it from here, I should be able to get us on the right slide here. Hold on. There we go. Am I coming through okay on the sound now, moderators?
Yes, you're loud and clear.
All right, very good. Well, this is, of course, the busy season for us. June is probably the busiest month here at the clinic, and this is an example to show you what we had greeting us with the morning mail. I think it was the last day of June, not counting UPS Ground and UPS Air and FedEx on the afternoon mail, so we've been pretty busy. But we did have time to put together some things here to show you some of the diseases and insects that we have seen. Let's start out with the diseases. And at the beginning, the middle, and the end here, I'm going to ask for your folks' help on the ground to keep your eyes open for a few things. And this is one of them. This is a leaf spot on Loropetalum, which we had never seen before. And it turns out that this is caused by a fungus in the genus Pseudocercospora that has been found on sweet gum before, which is in the same family, but had never been reported on Loropetalum in the United States. It had been reported on Loropetalum in China, not surprising, but that's the first report, as far as we know, from the U.S. So if you see this sort of spot on Loropetalum, please do let us know, and we can kind of get an idea of what it's doing out there and how prevalent it is. Another disease, well, I kind of gave it away, but this is a question for the group here. Why are these India hawthorns so different looking? This is a planting bed right outside the building we're in here at the clinic. And the answer is, of course, that we have a difference in the resistance or susceptibility to Entomosporium leaf spot. We usually think about Entomosporium on the red-tip photinias, where it causes so much destruction. But the other plant that we see it on a lot is on India hawthorn. And it turns out, and this is the main point for showing these slides, that there is a difference in susceptibility among different varieties. The one that I know that has good resistance is called Snow White. I'm not sure what the one that was next to this plant was, but you could tell same microclimate, obviously, the same pressure of inoculum, and yet a much different result in terms of how healthy or how diseased the plant is. Yes, thanks, Steve. That's Snow White is the cultivar. Here I'd like to see the show of checks and X's of who has seen this particular symptom, this flagging on redbud trees in your area. I have seen a lot of this right around this part of the city here, on campus, at Pullen Park, over at the headquarters, if you want to call it that, for the Catholic Diocese of Raleigh, which is right across from Centennial Campus. There's been a lot of this symptom of branches going out on redbud. I see that probably about 4 have said they've seen it, and a couple have said that they haven't. If we look at it a little closer, I cut this branch out when the grounds crew wasn't looking, and you can tell that, let's pick a pointer here, you can tell that here is a healthy branch coming out from the larger branch. So you might think that right at that point there you'd be able to prune it out. As it turns out, though, if we take a look at that cut end down there, the wood inside was quite affected. Now I can't guarantee that was Botryopspheriae there. I didn't isolate for it, but let's suppose it is. So you have to really look for where the good wood begins and then go several inches below that, of course, to a node, doing your good pruning practices at the same time. Now, another interesting thing here was looking at the other end of this branch where we saw that there was an old pruning wound there. Now, whether that was an infection that was moving down the branch and didn't get pruned out the last time, or if it was actually an infection that occurred at the pruning wound, I don't really know. But it's something to think about in both the sense of where you need to prune and also the fact that pruning tools can be a way of moving this particular disease. Here we can see a little bit of the wood that stayed there on the edge of the knife of the shears, and you pick up the fungus on the shears and you can move it to a healthy plant. There are a couple of things that you can use. 70% alcohol, either grain alcohol or rubbing alcohol, used at full strength, dipped, not rinsed. That's good for both fungi and bacteria. You could use sodium hypochlorite, such as Clorox, 6 gallons of that to 100 gallons of water. Again, dipping or spraying with it, not rinsing. Of course, that's going to eventually wear down your tools some, so you want to make sure and keep them oiled and in good shape. Let me also mention, as far as this disease of the Botryopspheriae canker, it is favored by drought, or drought predisposes the trees to this disease. So I think that the extent of symptoms that we're seeing around here may be a reflection of last year's drought. Let me now move on to a couple of samples by request here. When this one was submitted, and it was submitted with a note that we please talk about it on this program, and it was an excellent sample to show, as we'll see. Let me first ask the question, if we could get up our multiple choice selections, please, and we'll see if people consider this symptom, or I'm sorry, this stuff on the underside of the hemlock needles to be scale insects, woody adelgids, Aeciva rust fungus, pine vole whiskers, or none of the above. And if one of the other moderators, since I still don't know how to change the options here from yes, no to multiple choice, if someone could help me out here, I would appreciate it. Thank you. All right, Stephen Bambera has weighed in. All right. Of course, a lot of folks are not in hemlock growing areas, so we'll take it this way. See, we've got an A, a couple of B's, and more C's. Thank you. And actually, by majority and also by scientific fact, C is the winner. These are Aecia of a rust fungus, which in this case turned out to be the hemlock hydrangea rust. The scientific name used to be Pucciniastrum hydrangea, but now it has been moved into the genus Thecopsora hydrangea. And this particular rust is what we call heteroecious, which means it alternates between two hosts of very different types. And in this particular case, as it's obvious from the name, between hemlocks and hydrangeas. Now, the hemlock also gets another needle rust that looks identical to this unless you get it under the microscope and look at the spores very carefully. And that one is one that alternates between hemlock and ericaceous hosts, such as vaccinium, for example, blueberry, or even rhododendron. It turned out that on this particular sample, we had also another rust which is hemlock twig rust, a completely different organism. Melamsera is the genus, and this typically causes a little crook or shepherd's crook on the tips of the twigs of a hemlock, and it is an auticeous rust, meaning it will infect hemlock and then hemlock again and then hemlock again, so it does not need an alternate host. The good news about these two rusts is that they are not serious pests of the hemlock tree. They're not going to really damage the health of the tree, and they will only infect the current year's needles. Our second.
So, Mike, do you recommend any management strategies for that?
No, I do not in the home landscape. Now, if you are a nursery producer, then we might need to talk about a few options. But and you have to think too: are you producing maybe blueberries as well, or hydrangeas as well, and that sort of thing. But for the home landscape, really, there's nothing that you need to do. All right. The second issue that was requested to talk about here was what I have been seeing in the northeast part of the state on particularly crepe myrtle. And I've got some of Tom Campbell's script that he had sent to me, but Tom, with your pardon, I hope I'm going to really depart from that script and just kind of talk a few points on the disease as you've seen it there, and then about this group of pathogens in general. What the symptoms that he was describing here, you can see on the crepe myrtle, dieback of some branches, and then also this proliferation of small shoots, which in technical terms we call a witch's broom. And it turns out that since 2001, I went back to look at the records, the clinic here has reported or diagnosed several cases of phytoplasma disease in both holly, blue holly and Japanese holly, and also in crepe myrtle, along with other plants that we would maybe usually think about it in. And the symptoms have included stunting and witch's brooms. I'm looking at some notes that I had here, a nursery in Lenore County in 2001 with hollies, the 2002 from Elizabeth City on crepe myrtle, Elizabeth City State University actually, then in Stanley County at Stanley Memorial Hospital in November of 2004, and then again in the Elizabeth City area in 2005 and this year. And our phytoplasma expert, Jorge Abad, has now taken a job with the USDA and is up in Washington, but he has graciously offered to continue to work with us on these particular diseases. And so, well, let me get to that in a minute. Here, again, pictures from Thomas Campbell. I don't know if these were from the 2005 incidents or from the 2002 incident, but you can see the stunted proliferated growth on the crepe myrtle, and then also in this other shrub, the dieback that's associated with it. It turns out that these are difficult diseases to diagnose. They don't come up that often, and many of our usual techniques are not going to work. They basically you have to use DNA analysis to identify conclusively a phytoplasma. Here are a few facts about this group of pathogens. They are bacteria, but they have no cell wall and therefore no definite shape. They were first seen in the 60s in plant tissue and thought to be similar. They do look similar to mycoplasmas and were for a long time called mycoplasma-like organisms. They lead a double life. They are parasites of plants, but also parasites of insects. And I believe I read once that the scientists feel that it was evolutionarily first an insect parasite that only afterward was able to adapt itself to the life as a plant parasite, within which it resides in the phloem, conductive tissue. And that's where we can realize that it will go systemic in the plant after a period of time, and is, of course, graft transmissible. So if you were to graft an infected plant onto a healthy plant, you would expect that this would also be passed to the healthy plant. And there are, in many cases, known insect vectors of these. And just to make sure that we're clear, as far as I know, aphids are not vectors of any phytoplasmas, nor are whiteflies, nor are mites, which of course aren't insects. The group of insects that we usually think about and are known as vectors for phytoplasma diseases are the leafhoppers. Of course, leafhoppers are also vectors of things like Pierce's disease, which is a different sort of bacterium altogether and is not a phytoplasma.
Mike, there's a
In
question
some
as to whether
cases,
the symptoms could be confused with drought injury.
I have not seen that that symptom caused by drought injury. The thing that it could be confused with would be herbicide injury. So you do need to, if you see that symptom, get a very good either records or talking to people involved to make sure that there weren't herbicides used not only in the current year but possibly in the year previous. As we know, glyphosate can get into woody plants and hang around through the winter and then cause symptoms the following year. So that would be the other thing that you would want to make sure and distinguish. All right, the question, does phytoplasma occur on unpruned crepe myrtles? Well, I have not got enough data on that. I actually don't know the answer to your question, Beverly. I can try and find out. I will make a note of that. But if you're thinking, would it be something that would be passed by pruning in and of itself, I don't think it would. All right. A couple of phytoplasma diseases that are well known and characterized. One is aster yellows, which occurs on a variety of plants. You can see the marigold on the right with typical symptoms, and a carrot with symptoms as well. These are in annual plants, of course, not going to be that serious because the next year it's not going to overwinter in the soil or anything like that, and they tend to be sort of a curiosity. They can be very curious. Here on coneflower, we get a symptom where the flower parts become leafy instead of their normal color as petals, and likewise on hydrangea, there's a disease called virescence, meaning that the flower parts have turned green and leafy instead of their usual colorful and flowery. Other phytoplasma diseases include bunch disease of pecan. This is a picture of a pecan tree from the Plant Pathology Department slide collection. Ash yellows, which you may have heard of. Peach or prunus X disease, and coconut lethal yellowing, which interestingly enough is one of the diseases that was in the news when I was younger and got my interest raised in plant pathology. Now, one very interesting sequel to all this is that yesterday, after I had already planned to talk about this situation, a sample was brought into the clinic with very similar symptoms to what Tom was showing from out in the northeast part of the state. So I asked the person, the landscaper who brought that in, to please bring us some fresher material to work with. And as I say, Jorge is willing to work on the DNA to help us characterize, first of all, confirm that we've got a phytoplasma, if it turns out they didn't have any herbicides that were used in that area, or if we really suspect it, we can extract DNA, send it up to him, and he'll help us confirm that it's a phytoplasma and also assign it to a group. Hopefully these things are categorized by different groups. All right, another question for the group here. This is a tip of a hosta leaf with a kind of a dead spot just starting here and here, limited by the veins. Let's take some votes on what people think this is. I'm trying to remember if this was from a nursery or garden center situation, but it was a commercial situation that we got this plant in. All right. Well, without further ado, it is D, foliar nematodes. which belong to the genus Aphelincoides, and the damage can get quite severe on hostas. It is also a problem on strawberries, on butterfly bush, on ferns, on heuchera, and chrysanthemum. Those are some of the hosts that it's most commonly a problem on. And if we look under the microscope here, cutting a leaf, you can see the fore end of the nematode coming out of the leaf here. And right here is the stylet, that piercing stylet that it uses to penetrate the plant cells and draw the juice from them. They live within the leaf tissue, but when the leaf is wet, they'll come out of the stomates and swim around in the film of water on the surface of the leaf and then can re-enter stomates. So they may be limited by veins within the leaf, at least for a time, but then they're able to overcome them. Of course, you're not going to see these without a microscope because they are extremely small, practically transparent, and therefore not something that you would be able to diagnose visually. Well, the symptoms would give you a very good clue, but to confirm it. Now, I know that, was it Anne who earlier had said that they had not seen too many tomato samples. I did a quick check, and we've had over 120 tomato samples in the clinic this year so far. So we are seeing a fairly good number. What can you do for foliar nematodes? I'm sorry, back up here. What can you do? They are very difficult to control. You would think that you could just cut the foliage off, but they're just intimately associated with the plant. They get down there in the crown or someplace, and they're able to survive. There are some pesticides which I believe are able to be used in a commercial setting, but I don't think in a homeowner setting. So I'm not sure quite what, other than just roguing the affected plants, a homeowner would be able to do if they had foliar nematodes. All right, with the okay, one of the Steve Van Bear talks about avoid surface watering on the leaves. That, of course, is a good general recommendation for really any fungal, bacterial, or foliar nematode disease. But I just wanted to hit a couple of tomato situations here, one of which is quite important. Here's one that we see year in and year out, summer after summer, and we'll take another vote to see if folks think this symptom of wilting could be caused by southern blight, southern bacterial wilt, one or the other, neither, or both of them and other things as well. Okay, let's pop up the graph here. And the B's and E's are neck and neck. Well, it turns out that if you read the question carefully, what can cause this, it would be E would be the answer. What has caused it in this particular case? Well, we'll see. How do we go about confirming our suspicions? We look at the base of the plant. We don't see any exterior evidence of southern blight, Sclerotium ralphsii. Although, you know, that's not always going to be there right away. But we cut into the stem and we see discolored vascular tissue. So we suspect we do have a vascular pathogen. Go to the kitchen and we grab a beaker and a twist tie, cut off a piece of the stem, and immerse the tip of it into a bit of water there. If you don't have a beaker in your kitchen, well, you can use any straight-walled clear glass. And then within a minute or two, you'll start to see if we do have the bacterial wilt pathogen, Ralstonia solanacearum. You'll see these strands of bacteria streaming out of the cut end of the stem, and this will give you a confirmation of what you have. Just a little warning, not that you shouldn't do this at home, that's fine, but this will only work basically with tomato. Probably work with tobacco as well, but for example with pepper, there's just not enough of a population of the bacteria to be able to do this test reliably. And it does, let me just pass the slide that we used last time. It does attack not only plants in the Solanaceae, pepper, eggplant, tomato, etc., but also some composites such as marigold, dahlia, sunflower, a couple others that I can't remember right now, and is very persistent in the soil. Oops. Now, here is something that so far we have seen in North Carolina this year only on potato, as far as I know. Of course, the potato crop is at the end now, but we are probably going to get it on tomato in the mountains and maybe outside the mountains as well. We know that it is on tomato in Georgia, not too many hours by car, a couple hours by car from the North Carolina mountains, and I believe it's also reported in Virginia on tomato. So we do need to be on the alert for this. It's a disease that is favored by cool, wet conditions, and the little slogan up there at the top, a little bit of a potato humor there, but use that to make the point that tomato and potato are the only hosts that you will see this disease on. So late blight does not get on pepper or other plants that you would have in the garden. You can see the blighting of the foliage here in general. Looking up close, it affects not only the foliage, but the fruits. This is a disease that once it gets started, it can really get explosive under favorable conditions. It turns hot and dry and it shuts down. Now look closely at this particular picture. The spot, this initial blotch here caused by late blight, you can tell it's sort of a grayish brown and it's diffuse in its edges. It doesn't have real sharply defined edges. Under high humidity conditions, you can get sporulation of the fungus, this white sort of fuzz on the underside of the leaf. So that would be diagnostic. The fruit symptom also a similar blotchy appearance. And you don't want to confuse it with, for example, this case here. This is a tomato plant that had both septoria leaf spot and root knot nematode. The root knot nematode was causing the wilting, and then the septoria leaf spot was tearing up the leaves. But if you look closely at it, you'll see that these leaf spots are very well defined and have sharp edges, as do the leaf spots caused by the early blight pathogen, which is a fungus in the genus Alternaria. So if you do come across symptoms that look like late blight, we do want to see it here in the clinic. We can confirm it, and also there's people working on genetic analysis of the pathogen and trying to trace where these things are coming from and so forth. So if you have something suspicious, we would gladly receive it here as a sample.
Mike, there's a question about treatment for southern blight.
Okay, yeah, I'll let me finish here with late blight real quick, and then I would be happy to do that. The situation with late blight is that you can't get behind a curve on it because it can go so quickly in favorable weather conditions. There is no resistance available in tomato cultivars. There may be one, wait a second, I take that back, there may be one cherry tomato cultivar with some resistance, but basically the tomato plants that you have are susceptible. So if you've got the combination of the susceptible host, favorable weather conditions, and the pathogen itself, if and when it gets here, then we're going to have really to be talking about chemical control. I got some suggestions from Frank Lowe's and from Kelly Ivers. Chlorothalonil, which is available to home gardeners, can be used, has to be used regularly. Check the label, check the interval before harvest, of course. For organic folks, the Serenade Garden, Bacillus pseudolus, And that, of course, well, I shouldn't say of course, but that is not going to be as effective as the Daconil, but it's an option for your organic folks. And copper-containing products could also be used. I don't know if Steve Moore is still on. He didn't mention copper-containing products for disease control in organic systems, but I believe that some of them can be used as well. If he's on, maybe he could comment on that. For further information regarding late blight on tomato, here are a couple of websites that you can check out. A blog that Sue Colucci posted on the Western North Carolina Veggies blog spot a week or so ago, and then our extension fact sheet by Dr. Kelly Ivers on late blight on field stake tomatoes. Both of those URLs, you can check those out, and in particular, the first of those has a lot of links that will take you to things like comparison between late blight and early blight and so forth. With that, I asked for questions, and actually we already had one. It was about the treatment for southern blight. The treatment for southern blight is basically to rotate your crops. Avoid the solanaceous crops and avoid those composites that are hosts for several years. Let the population of the bacteria in the soil decline. It's not going to ever completely disappear, but and then come back with your other hosts. So there's really not much that can be done in that particular disease. All right, I've got 1 minute or less. If there are any other questions. All right, then I will turn this over to Dave Steffen for the insect portion of our presentation.
Okay, I think I'm hooked up here. Hold on a sec, make an adjustment. Okay, we're going to talk about some of the insect situations that we've had coming in the past week here. Folks, can you hear me all right? I'll take that as a yes. Okay, we're just going to open up with a shot here. I don't have multiple choice questions like Mike does, but remember this image. We're going to get back to it a little bit later and take some guesses as to what this might be. Possibilities include a close-up of the Hubble telescope, an ice cave somewhere in the Arctic, maybe the Osama bin Laden's hideout. Anyway, this is a close-up photo of a critter, and think about it. We'll get back to this one a little bit later. I'm going to kind of do these. Oops, I'm sorry, I did it again. Hit the wrong button. I'm always doing this. And Mike's trying to pull me out of the. There we go. Okay, sorry about that again. One more time. I'll probably screw up yet again. Okay, this is an image we had come in last week, and as you can see from the ruler next to this, this is a pretty impressive looking spider. Fishing spiders are a small group of medium to large spiders. We have several species here in North Carolina, and as the name would suggest, most of them are found close to water. But a few species can be found sometimes at a distance from water, including this one. This is probably Dolomedes tenebrosus, our largest species of fishing spider here in North Carolina. And you can see that from leg tip to leg tip, this spider spans 4 to 5 inches across. This would be an adult female. And they're usually hiding during the daytime in some sort of cavity. This individual who sent the image in said this one hides in a tree hole cavity and then comes out at night. They're usually found resting on vertical surfaces, head downward, and they are ambush predators. They don't use webs to capture their prey, but instead they just sit and wait for something to crawl across their field of vision, and when they see something they want, they just pounce with incredible speed.
And like a squirrel, they can dodge around a tree trunk or whatever object they're hiding on and trying to escape. This one might turn up on a foundation of a house, on a deck. A couple of times we've even gotten them turning up indoors. And while the bite from one of these is not dangerous, it might give you a heart attack if you sort of bumped up against one in the house there unexpectedly. All right, some of my favorite critters include ticks, which tend to give some people the heebie-jeebies, but ticks are basically overgrown mites, and just like some mites are predators on other insects or other mites or blood feeders, parasites, so ticks are blood feeders. Now, the two species of ticks that account for the vast majority of all ticks biting people in North Carolina are the Lone Star tick, and this is an adult female, the upper side and underside, and the American dog tick, again an adult female, upper side and underside. And of the dozen or so, 15 species of ticks in North Carolina, only these two routinely get on people. There's a couple other species, including the black-legged tick, which occasionally get on people. And then the other species of ticks we have simply very rarely or never get on humans. They stay on birds or small animals that are their normal hosts. Getting a little closer, up close and personal with the Lone Star tick, obviously the name comes from this silvery white spot in the middle of the back of the female. Male would be similar in general appearance, but would have more extensive ornamentation in terms of silvery lines squiggling across the back. And getting a little closer still, we'll look at the business end of the tick, and these are the mouth parts here. These paired structures on either side are the palps, and they're segmented, and they do not enter the flesh when a tick is biting. This section in the middle here is called the hypostome, and this is the actual part that is inserted. And there's no pain involved. You don't feel anything when a tick is going in. I don't know if they use some sort of anesthetic or how they go about it. But in any case, this is the part that is actually inserted, and I believe they secrete some sort of saliva which forms a glue and helps them to stay in place. And that's why it's so difficult to remove a tick. You can't just pull one out easily. They are well stuck in there. And then when the tick is done feeding several days later, perhaps, it will secrete an enzyme that dissolves that plug, and then it's able to extract itself. But when you look at this thing from the, whoops, got a little ahead of myself there. This is the same tick from the underside, and you can see here, this is the hypostome again, and it's got little backward pointing teeth, little barbs that help it hold in place when it's going in. And they're kind of wicked looking little things, but like I say, there's no pain involved when the tick is biting, and these barbs simply help the hypostome to stay in place while the tick is initiating the entrance to feed. The other species, the American dog tick, this is a close-up of the female. Again, the male American dog tick would be similar in appearance, but it would have a little more in the way of white ornamentation on the back. This shield-shaped structure we call a scutum, and on the female it only covers a part of the body. The rest of this abdomen here can expand with a full blood meal to many times the original size of the tick. The male would have, on both species, this scutum would cover more of the back because the male does not engorge in a blood meal the way the female does. The most notable difference between the two species is the shape of the mouth parts here. Now you'll notice the American dog tick has much shorter mouth parts. This is the palp here on either side, and in between we have the hypostome. I don't have a close-up of the underside of the hypostome here, but of the two species, the American dog tick is commonly found in suburban areas. It fortunately does not seem to feed on humans in either of its juvenile stages. Ticks have four primary stages. There's the egg. The egg hatches into the larva, which people sometimes call seed ticks, and then the larva gets a blood meal, drops off the host, sheds its skin, becomes the nymph, the nymph has to get back on an animal, gets a full blood meal, drops off to shed the skin, and becomes the adult. Unfortunately, the American dog tick doesn't seem to feed on humans in either the larval or nymphal stages. So even though they may be abundant in an area, you're only going to get them as adults. And in my yard, where I have plenty of small animals, the adults start to show up in April, and they will continue into August before they finally die. The Lone Star tick, on the other hand, will bite people in all three of its life stages. Now, ticks that can transmit a number of diseases, among them Rocky Mountain spotted fever, of course, Lyme disease, ehrlichiosis, and several other diseases. The good news is, at least among the diseases transmitted by ticks in North Carolina, most, if not all of them, are caused by rickettsial or spirochete organisms, which are basically bacteria-like organisms. That means they can be treated with antibiotics. And as far as I know, all of the tick-transmitted diseases here in North Carolina, they're caught early, can be 100% successfully treated with antibiotics with no lasting effects. It's when the diseases are left untreated that problems and sometimes even death can result. So if you are bitten by a tick, chances are the percentage of ticks carrying a disease is actually fairly small, although it's hard to say whether it's 5% or 2% in a given area. But if any sort of flu-like symptoms develop, that is a potential disease symptoms, and you would want to get to your doctor for that. If possible, of course, save the tick so it can be identified, although we can't analyze the actual tick to see whether it's carrying disease. We can just, by knowing what species of tick it is, we have the, can say, okay, these are the diseases that this species is known to carry. All right, moving along a little bit, we're going to look at some of the insect problems that we have come in. And this is a very standard collecting technique for finding insects that are on foliage of plants. You hold it upside down and then smack it good like a newborn baby, and then see what sort of scrambles. And I've got a big sheet of paper there to catch the bugs and the dirt and the stuff that come falling out. This was an acorn squash sample that came in, and this was a lovely sample. It had some really good, oops, let's go back here, had some good insect problems on it. And I have this rogues gallery or family portrait of a bunch of the squash bugs and their nymphs that came in. Down here I have a cluster of the eggs, and then we have some of the younger nymphs here working our way on up to the adult squash bug. Squash bugs can be found on probably all of the cucurbit crops grown in North Carolina: squash, pumpkin, pickles, zucchini. Any of those are fair game to the squash bug and their relative. We have two species of squash bugs here in North Carolina. The adult here is between about 1/2 and 3/4 of an inch long, and I'm not sure what stage they overwinter. Probably hibernating as adults. I'm not even sure how many generations a year we have. But the nymphs are sort of a light gray color here, possibly a bluish gray tint, and the adults are sort of a medium gray in color. Looking a little closer at the eggs, they're like little golden footballs deposited on the leaf in these regular grid-like patterns. And if we look closely here at, we can actually see the developing embryo within the egg. We've got eye spots visible here. And you notice this little circular line just barely visible on the egg. This is a suture on the egg, and when the nymph is going to hatch, it can pop this suture off. It's got a special structure, like an inflatable balloon, that it can use to break through the egg membrane and emerge. And then the young will fan out across the leaf to feed on the foliage. Close-up of the nymphs here, and one thing I want to point out, many kinds of bugs, of course stink bugs have the reputation in particular, but actually many kinds of bugs have some noxious tasting chemicals that they use for protection. And on adult bugs, the gland openings for these chemicals are on the side of the thorax, but on the nymphs of bugs, these gland openings, there's usually 2 of them, are on the middle of the abdomen, or on the back of the insect. So the nymphs are as protected as the adults are. It's just that the scent glands open in a different location. If they were to open on the back in the adult, they would be underneath the wings here, where it probably wouldn't do as much good. So although we can't see them here, the glands for the scent the scent glands open on the side of the thorax here, approximately where the arrow is pointing right now. You can also see that on the nymphs here, these are the wing pads, and the wings are developing within. So this is probably a last stage nymph here. When it sheds its skin for the final time, then the fully developed wings of the adult will emerge. What is that buzzing sound? Well, what's the buzz? And that would be cicadas. We have a number of species of what we call annual or dog-day cicadas here in North Carolina. Most of them belong to the genus Tibicin, and there can be 3 or 4 or 5 species present throughout the summer at any one location. Some of the annual cicadas begin to emerge around the end of May, beginning of June, and then other species will continue to appear later in the summer. And of course, those are the insects that make that loud, annoying, buzzing sound up in the treetops. And some of them are called during the heat of the day, and then there are other species which may be most active toward dusk. At least in the Raleigh area, in my neighborhood, I hear them most prominently in the early evening hours. They really get cranking then and will call up until almost dark before they finally shut up. We have, this may actually be 2 different species. Found these both on campus here. One of them dead, one alive. And this is just a typical dog-day cicada, or typical Tibicin species. And you see the markings are a little bit different, both on the head and on the thorax. These individuals are about 1.5 inches long, medium size as cicadas go. Some of our species of cicadas here can reach pretty impressive sizes, bodies well over 1 inch long and a wingspread of 3 to 4 inches, so that's a big bug. If you flip them over, it turns out one of them is a male, and these are the plates that cover the sound-producing organism in the male. They're at the base of the abdomen, and the female lacks those plates, but she has the ovipositor, the structure with which she lays her eggs at the tip of the abdomen. And getting a little closer, these are the plates, this underside of the male again, these are the plates covering the sound-producing organ. And that mystery photo at the beginning, oops, got ahead of myself there. The mystery photo is one of these plates I've lifted up, and we can peer into the sound-producing structure. There's, I guess, a resonating chamber here, and there is a membrane with a muscle attached to the membrane that can vibrate very rapidly, and this is how they produce that loud whining or wailing sound. And each song is species-specific for different cicadas, so the females can recognize the appropriate male and be attracted to her when she's ready to mate. The female, however, has this sword-like ovipositor, and this is what she uses to insert the eggs into the stems of plants. They'll pick stems usually about 1/4 inch in diameter or so, lay the eggs in there, causing these distinctive slits. Now, the annual or dog-day cicadas, even though we have individuals appear every year, their generations are staggered. So while they may take a number of years to reach maturity, just like the 13-year and 17-year cicadas do, we still have individuals within the same area that are emerging every single year. So say the same species will be there, just staggered generations. And the 13-year and 17-year cicadas will be emerging earlier in the year than the annual cicadas do. The various broods, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail here, but throughout much of North Carolina, the most widely distributed and common brood is called brood 19 of the 13-year cicadas. And they are scheduled to emerge in 2 years again. In the spring of 2011, we should see widespread cicadas across much of the Piedmont of North Carolina, even into the upper coastal plain and in the mountains. They tend to be more northern in their distribution, especially the 17-year cicadas, so you're more likely to see them in some places in the mountains in a given year than you are in the eastern part of the state. Cicadas, the 17 and 13-year cicadas are generally absent from the deep south, the coastal plain areas, both of the Atlantic and the Gulf Coast states. They tend to be more northern. But the annual cicadas, they're less abundant, less densely populous than the than the periodical cicadas or the 13 and 17-year cicadas, and so they don't cause as much damage as you get with the concentrated numbers of periodical cicadas. Scale insects, another group of the Homoptera, and one that we've already talked about before, but these are some interesting ones. These belong to the group of scales called the soft scales, the Coccidae, many of which we have in North Carolina only in greenhouse situations where they're protected from the winters because they can't survive the winters here. This pyriform scale is a typical tropical scale. In this case, it happens to be on the leaf of a Schefflera plant, but we've seen them on other hosts as well. And we would never find these scales on a plant growing outdoors in North Carolina unless it was brought outdoors from a greenhouse situation. They have a typical life history like other soft scales. In this case, this is an old female. She's probably dead by now. But you can see this waxy deposit around her. She creates these wax filaments in ovisac, and her eggs are actually deposited on the underside. I flipped one over here, and you can see it's almost like a fingerprint, this wax outline here. And although it doesn't show up very well, these would be the hatched eggshells where she has laid the eggs on the underside of the body, and then the nymphs have scattered from there. I have a couple of juvenile specimens or nymphs showing up on either side of her. This would be a young adult female. This is one that's probably just recently matured, but she hasn't begun to produce eggs yet, and these are some younger nymphs over here. And for scale, no pun intended, these are the tips of the fine forceps that I use to do the manipulation of insects. Another kind of scale that we get in, this is another one of the armored scales, is called the pine needle scale. And we have a number of species of these Chionaspis here in North Carolina. None of them are serious pests, but occasionally on individual plants, one of the Chionaspis species maybe cause minor damage to the plants. These are armored scales, again, so they produce this shell, and here they are lined up along the pine needle. Here's one that's probably been attacked by a predator or a parasite. It's had the part of the shell chewed out. These are adults here, or the adult shell, not the living scale itself, and the juveniles down here. And get a little closer. You can see that this is, you see these concentric lines here, and this shell is produced by glands on the upper side of the body of the scale, which is actually, the living scale is hidden underneath, and by swinging her abdomen back and forth, she secretes this shell, which starts here at the narrow end and then gradually extends it this way. And once she's finally mature, she will lay her eggs, and they will all be protected underneath this shell, and when the crawlers hatch out, they will scatter across the foliage. I was trying to find some living individuals. Now here is a somewhat shriveled up adult female. This is the underside of that shell, or test as we call it, peeled off, and here's an egg. Some of these were dead and dried already, so I didn't have a good example of that, but did find an example. Whoops, that one got cut. We had an image of a parasitic or predatory fly larva feeding on one of these scales, but that one got cut. Okay, back to that acorn squash sample that I showed you a few minutes ago with the squash bug on it. They also had the striped cucumber beetle feeding on that one, and this is just some of the kind of raggedy feeding injury produced by the adults of the striped cucumber beetle. Another family group photo. These were several of the adults that came off that sample, showing the upper side and the underside. This beetle is between about 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch long, about 1/6 of an inch, and it belongs to a group that includes several crop pests here in North Carolina, among them the bean leaf beetle and the spotted cucumber beetle, also known as the southern corn rootworm, which cause damage to various crops here in North Carolina, especially the spotted cucumber beetle. Feeds on a very wide range of plants, including ornamentals as well as vegetables. The larvae, and there's a pupa, and yeah, right here is a pupa of the striped cucumber beetle. These were in the soil with that acorn squash sample. The larvae are elongate, worm-like in appearance. They're up to almost 1/2 inch long. very slender. They do have short little legs. They're not legless, but this is a close-up. This is the head of the striped cucumber beetle, and doesn't show up too well, but this is a plate at the tip of the abdomen. There are a couple little spines on there, and she probably uses that plate helping her to burrow through the soil while she's searching for the roots to feed on. Another pest beetle here in North Carolina is the white-fringed beetle, and it's a weevil, and it's so named for this white racing stripe along the side of the body. These guys are up to almost a ½ inch long, and they will feed on a very wide range of plants, both the adults on the foliage and the larvae in the soil and the roots, but it's probably best known for causing damage to tobacco here in North Carolina and can be quite a pest, especially in sandier soils. We had one come in a sample last week, and I actually found one crawling on the sidewalk on campus as I was leaving one day last week. Here's a close-up of it. I have to have my fingers in there, unfortunately, because she wouldn't sit still for a picture, but so I had to restrain her. You notice it doesn't show up real well, but weevils are characteristically, they have the snout. This belongs to a group they're called the broad-nosed weevils, or broad-nosed snout beetles. It has a fairly short, broad snout. But typical of weevils, it also has this elbowed antenna. So you have one long segment at the base here. The very first segment is very elongate, and then you have a bunch of shorter segments that usually end in a little club at the end, characteristic of most weevils. Another pest beetle here in North Carolina. This belongs to the leaf beetle group, and this is one of our so-called tortoise beetles. We have a number of tortoise beetle species here in North Carolina, several of which feed on morning glory and sweet potato. And this particular one is called the mottled tortoise beetle. Both the larvae and adults will feed on sweet potato in particular, and also on some species of morning glory. Many of them have this beautiful golden color like this. Unfortunately, the gold color does not persist. Very shortly after the specimen dies and starts to dry out, that gold color fades to a dull yellow or just tan, and the only way you can save it is in a really good picture like this. There's one they call the golden tortoise beetle, which is just solid shiny gold all over. Okay, running short on time here, so I get to a few more things. Now, this is one that I found last weekend while I was out looking for samples, and at first I thought it was a cluster of eggs on this dogwood leaf, and it's actually arranged in sort of a geometric pattern. You got this outer ring, and then you got a cluster in the center. But when I looked at it more closely, I realized it was something else. This is actually a cluster of pupae of a parasitoid wasp, probably in the family Eulophidae, and probably what happened is the caterpillar was infested with these things, and when the larvae matured and they exited the body, the caterpillar, what was left of it, dropped to the ground, and these little guys pupated right on the leaf. So got a close-up here, and the little pupae are mummy-like in appearance. You can see, and I'll have a closer image, but you can see the appendages, the legs and wings and antennae sort of plastered down on the surface. And these little brown clusters, one associated with each pupa. And this is called a meconium, and as is typical with parasitic wasps and also wasps that have their larvae inside a nest, they retain all the waste material within the body of the larva, because if they were to void it inside their prey or inside the nest, it would just create a mess. So they keep it in sort of a dead-end intestine until they are fully mature and then shed their skins to the pupal state, and then they shed that all at one time. Unfortunately, parasitoids can also get parasitized, and we call parasites of parasites hyperparasites. And in this case, some little parasitoid or hyperparasitoid wasp had attacked the pupae of this Eulophid wasp, and so it chewed out. If the wasp itself had emerged, it would be split, the pupa would be split along the back, along this suture line you can see here, but instead it would self-attack. And occasionally we even get parasitoids of parasitoids of parasitoids. It starts to get a little complicated sometimes. The whole subject of parasitoid wasps and parasitic wasps is almost as interesting as galls, but we don't have time to go into it today. Just the last few things I noticed, there are a lot of leaf tire caterpillars out there that can be found on a wide variety of hardwoods, especially oaks of various kinds, on beeches, on sweet gums, on sourwoods. They belong to several different families of moths. In most cases, they don't cause any real damage. The damage is more cosmetic. Here's where the skeletonizing of a leaf has been pulled away. One leaf has kind of been sewn to the other leaf. And here's some of the silk and the droppings from the caterpillar. Usually there are a lot fewer caterpillars than there are leaf nests because each caterpillar will only spend 1 or 2 days in each spot and then it'll move on, leaving a bunch of empty decoy leaves behind. This is a really interesting one. This is a damage caused by some species of spider mite that we have not encountered before. And what was neat is that I found these leaves when I was out looking for insect samples last week and brought them in. And then just a couple days later we had, this is on northern white oak, and a couple days later we had this very same problem brought in on a white oak from campus here. So this is where the mites have fed primarily along the midrib and along the lateral veins of the leaf, causing this chlorosis. Unfortunately, by the time we found them, the mites had already shut down for the year, so there was lots of eggshells there, shed skins, but no living mites to work with. So we don't know which spider mite this is, and I'll be looking for them again in June come next year, and hopefully I'll be able to find some of them and identify what this is, because right now it's an unfamiliar, sorry about that, it's an unfamiliar situation, and I'm really curious to know what might this turns out to be. So, barely finished up in time, and ask if we got any questions here. Okay, I'm not hearing anything, or if anybody got...
All right, David. David,
Yeah,
I've got
okay,
a
go ahead.
question while we're waiting, and that is on that ornamental sweet potatoes.
Yes.
I frequently see chew holes in there that I have on the foliage that I have usually kind of blamed on the turquoise beetle there, but is there anything else that's doing that? Because I never find the beetles on there.
I'm sure there are some caterpillars that feed on the plants. I haven't found any on a regular basis. I do know that these tortoise beetles have distinct preferences for certain species or certain cultivars, because I've tried to offer them morning glory that's growing wild right along the railroad tracks here on campus, and it's got a fairly hairy leaf, and they turn their noses up at it initially, but when they get hungry enough they will feed on it. So they may prefer smooth leaf varieties over the hairy leaf varieties. But as far as other caterpillars and other feeders that are regular or things that we really expect to find, I don't have any that turn up like that. Tortoise beetles are the most common leaf feeders I encounter on those hosts.
Okay.
Dave, is BT a best control for beetles?
Steve, are there strains of BT that work on the beetles like they do on caterpillars?
There is a beetle strain that has been developed for some beetles in some situations, but I haven't really recommended it in the sense that I don't think that I can say that it's going to be all that effective. If you're just looking for something that is maybe a little bit more organic, that's a tough one, really. So the answer to that is kind of, but I'm fudging, really. The BT that is mostly out there, like the dipel, is fairly specific, or the most common BT is fairly specific for the leps and stuff, and there are some other BT strains, and there is one, Tenebriano or something to that effect, I forgot, and that is for beetles, but you don't see that anyway in homeowner formulations that I'm aware of. So you're kind of out of luck on that.
Steve, do you want to field the question from Pascal about insecticides?
Let's see. I'll put my glasses on here. What insecticides are most commonly used to control these Panis beetles? Is that what is it? What is that? On edible fruit plants as well as simple ornamentals. Well, in general, 7 is probably the most common product that's used across the board, and it's pretty safe and it's pretty effective. It's not long lasting in the environment, so it's not all that residual. I'm not really up on my edible fruit insecticides, to be totally honest with you, but that one's fairly usable. We can kind of look into that a little bit more for you if you want. I don't think we have anybody, or we got so many good agents out here who deal more with, Japanese. That was supposed to be Japanese? Okay. Wow, all right. Well, what insecticides are commonly used to control Japanese beetles? All right. Well, let's go back to the 7. 7 has been the most commonly recommended product against Japanese beetles, and amazingly, for decades, it has never developed resistance. So that'll give you like 5 good days of control. After that, we have some of the pyrethroids that are out there that can also be used, and those are a little bit more persistent. I don't know if all of them have labels for fruits and vegetables. We'd have to check on that. We've got some more agents out there who can help me on that. In ornamentals, some of the neonicotinoids or the systemics like imidacloprid and others are having some beneficial usage against Japanese beetles. Whether it is exactly, I don't know, control or if it's maybe feeding inhibitor, I'm not quite sure, but this is something that we are seeing sort of secondary. There's a statement here about applying 7 with apples. 7 can be a thinning, or is used as a thinning agent for apples, so if you overdo it, you could cause your apples to fall off, which most people don't care for. Let's see, how about spinosad? For Japanese beetles, I am not so sure. You're talking about some conserved type product, and I'm going to have to plead ignorance on this, so if somebody can help me on that one. But I haven't seen it recommended generally for Japanese beetles.
Let me just jump in real quick and point out that we're a little bit over our 12 o'clock ending hour, so I want to take a break from the questions and do a quick wrap up, and then I would guess that Steve and Dave and Mike and others would be willing to hang on to answer any of your questions after we finish the wrap up. So let's just to let you know what's coming up on July 20th, the Horticulture Youth Judging ID Contest is going to be happening here in Raleigh. That's for 9 to 19-year-olds. You can get more information about it on the website. If you don't have a team coming from your county this year, you might want to connect with your county agent and look at how you could support the training of a team for next year. They have a lot of fun. They have opportunities to go to national and actually even get involved in international activities. So take a look at the website. Liz Driscoll is the person in the horticulture department who heads that up, and she's doing a lot of exciting things. Our next Plants, Pests, and Pathogens workshop will be on August 11th, and the featured speaker will be Will Hooker talking about permaculture. On August 12th, the Summer Green Show is happening at the Greensboro Coliseum, and there's a website here for more information about that. And the Master Gardener Conference is going to be in Mooresville on October 4th through the 7th, and I put a link in the chat for more information about the Master Gardener Conference. Does anybody else have any other information they want to share with the group for the good? Let's see. What's next? Okay. All right. Well, if not, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll just zip back to the question page, and if you have some questions, let's see, got a hand raised from Currituck County. Yeah, have a question? No. Okay. All right. Well, let's go back to the questions, and we'll see you guys next time, those of you that are already logging off. Thank you very much for participating. Please remember to log your participants on the wiki and to make sure that you're on the list, on the LMS list, so you get credit for continuing ed. Alrighty. Steve, you had a number of questions that came in on the chat while we were wrapping up about entrust.
Yeah, well, one of those, I checked the and entrust, yeah, is a spinosad, and it's used in nursery, and I know it also has a supplemental herb label. So, let's see. I don't know, again, how much it's used on fruits and vegetables, to be honest with you. Yeah, but it is OMRI listed.
Any other questions? All right, you guys have a good day.